Hello, I'm Aliénor Peyrefitte, standing in for Paul Taillon. This is the Strategic Thinkers series. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Eva Cohen. Eva is the founder and president of Civil Protection Youth Canada, a not-for-profit organization focused on building community resilience and disaster readiness through youth engagement. Eva grew up in Germany and immigrated to Canada in 2003. As an expert on citizen-based disaster response, Eva publishes, teaches, lectures, and advises broadcasts extensively on the subject. Eva, welcome to the Strategic Thinkers series.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to start by asking you a couple of questions. The first one is, why does Canada need a civilian-based disaster response capability?
Well, first of all, as we all know, disasters have been increasing, and so has the impact that disasters cause. What we have discovered with that is that the system just no longer can keep up with the demand. And if we fully rely on responders to deal with everything, it's just never going to be the same impact as if we approach a all hands on deck approach. And so a civilian-based response capacity has many, many advantages. One of them is that we shift our reactive system to proactive by including citizens and basing it on citizens, because citizens are already where the disaster is going to happen. We need local capacity, and citizens actually bring a lot of the capabilities that are required just through their professional backgrounds. So it is a very good solution going forward.
Okay, thank you. Why do you think a civilian-based organization would be more useful or effective rather than utilizing Canada's very well-trained and equipped military to undertake such disaster response or relief?
Well, as I just said, we want to shift from reactive to proactive. So by training citizens to be the response asset, to be the extra response when there's a need for scalability, relieves the military from becoming the asset of first convenience when they're supposed to be the asset of last resort. And so very often the military is seen as the best suited to help out, but that is mostly because they are the only federal government asset to be called to help out. They're not necessarily specialized in what is needed in a disaster. And it's not our best option to use highly sophisticated military equipment in a way that it's not intended to, when we could have specialized capabilities that are required for disaster response.
This brings about actually another question for you. What other countries have organized and developed a similar civilian-based program with their government structure, and why?
Yeah, so there are several other countries, just to name a few examples: Japan, Italy, France, Sweden, Germany have a citizen-based approach. And Germany is really unique in that it has a federal agency that is based on citizen volunteers. So 98% of the federal agency consists of unpaid citizen volunteers.
Wow.
And that's why it's a really good model for us, especially because Germany too is a federation where the states, or here the provinces, have jurisdiction in emergency management, and yet through this federal agency there is a government tool to support local authorities when support is needed.
Or when a disaster strikes, because it's only a matter of when, I assume.
And so to answer the question why, I mean, in Germany's case, it was that after World War II, Germany didn't have a military. And so I'd like to say that they basically stumbled across this really good solution by having, to base it on citizens, basically. And that was at a time where the nuclear threat was still very real, so civil defense was required. Plus, the country was in rubble, so there was also this whole, when you look at a disaster situation, the need to recover was very acute.
Yes, and rebuild everything. What spectrum of events, flooding, maybe ice storms, would a civilian-based disaster relief response organization would be mandated, trained, or equipped to effectively undertake such responses?
What we really do need is an all-hazards approach, because very often in Canada, especially with recent disasters, we're very much focused on climate change and extreme weather events. And then we don't really think about the fact that we also have a pretty high earthquake risk, and we need to be ready for any structural collapse, as well as accidents, big industrial accidents, for example, as well as any infrastructure failure, or let's say a cyber attack on our critical infrastructure or any other hostile activities. We need to be ready for any catastrophes, really.
Building a little bit more on that, what government department would be responsible for recruitment, training, equipping, and funding this disaster response capability? Who should lead this? Well, it is really under public safety when you think of it. They have an agency for all their portfolios except for emergency management. So a semi-independent operational federal agency under public safety would make sense. Should this civilian response capability be funded and organized to not only address domestic matters, but also could it be available and capable of conducting, disaster relief in other countries as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has many benefits. One of them is, as you can imagine, it just makes recruiting so much more attractive. But then also to be able to work internationally and with international partners is very helpful before disaster strikes, whether we are the ones that will receive help or whether we can actually contribute to international efforts. A certain standard is required to be able to do that, so that also improves our domestic response capabilities. And then I think something that can't be underestimated is the experience that you bring back to your domestic response by deploying internationally. So that is really very beneficial for our own response system.
What type of disasters do you foresee being incorporated within this disaster response mandate? And how do you foresee the training for it and the training that's going to be conducted to address these different disaster challenges?
As I said earlier, with the all hazards approach, we really do need technical threat prevention capabilities. We require emergency infrastructure repair, emergency infrastructure provisions, for example, the provision of drinking water or power supply or emergency bridge building. So the concept really is a modular approach that is based on the threat level or risk level in various regions across the country. And that's why the training needs to be done in those local detachments, depending on what module you need to have in which area. And then you can always build on that, or you can deploy across the country, because it is really a second response rather than the first response. So there is a way to escalate up. If you need to scale up, there is more that could come after the first section is deployed. And so in terms of the training, the way that can be conducted is that most of it is being done locally. It's a train-the-trainer system. So civilians train other civilians. And then there are specialty courses that can be done in, let's say, regional or maybe provincial training centers.
Can you maybe give us a specific example from one of the countries that you were mentioning earlier on, for instance, let's say Germany, so that the audience can get a, even more specific idea of what this could look like?
Yeah, so in Germany, the way it's organized is basically that the federal government is responsible for civil defense. And so they need to have capacity across the country. And that capacity is basically also available to support in disaster relief. So as I explained with the various modules, depending on the risk level of a certain region, you focus on that capability. So every station basically has some search and rescue, urban search and rescue capability. But then there are other highly specified capabilities that would only exist on the provincial level. For example, bridge building. You don't have that in every local or regional area, right? And so that's kind of how the structure works. And especially for a country the size of Canada, it makes a lot of sense to not have a centralized approach where you send off or deploy after the fact, but you actually have your assets across the country.
So what would you say the societal, experiential, governmental indicators that you've seen that would push the Canadian government to forge a civilian-based disaster relief capability in Canada?
Well, there are several. I mean, one thing that we've seen is that our system is not adequate anymore. It's overtasked and we're constantly scrambling to respond, which leads to an overuse of the Canadian Armed Forces, who really do need to focus on their main mandate as global conflicts are on the rise as well. So I think it's time for a different approach. But then there's another benefit of that as well, because as we've seen with, let's say, the trucker convoy or this big storm we had, the derecho that caused havoc over 1,000 kilometers, people have expectations of what the response should look like. And when they feel that the government is not doing what they expect they should be doing, it leads to societal unrest. Whereas if it's an all-hands-on-deck approach where everybody has a role and is part of the response, you do not end up with that blame game that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. When you think of the trauma that these situations cause in people when we're not ready, if we include citizens in the preparedness and training and being ready and being part of the response, it minimizes that effect, because you're not paralyzed by fear. You expect what could go wrong and you prepare for that. So that makes you more resilient, and it results in general resilience to include citizens in the approach.
A bit like CPR training in a way. You mentioned early in our discussion that Germany's civilian-based program has been ongoing for some 70 years now. What has been their experience in operationalizing and incorporating such a disaster relief program that is prepared to undertake or assist that government's mandate, drawing upon your personal experience, of course? How often are they called out to exercise their skills in a real-world disaster?
Yeah, so that's kind of why Germany's system is so unique and really beneficial. Germany has the Federal Agency for Technical Relief, called Technisches Hilfswerk, THW. And it is a federal agency, but based on unpaid volunteers who are on the local level. So that's a very unique structure when you think of it. 98% of this federal agency are unpaid staff. And they are constantly integrated into the response system, because it is the federal mandate basically to support, but they can only get deployed when they are requested locally. And so what they've created is a system that offers support when it's needed, and it can be tapped into by local authorities on demand. That means that they want to ensure that this is a well-oiled machine and they work together regularly, which means that they can also ask them to support in non-disaster situations, just to make sure that the collaboration is there and it works, which is a great way for the volunteers to continuously practice their skills, but also the whole response and deployment mechanism. So that has proven to work really well. And to answer the second half, I mean, just last year, THW was deployed 1.2 million hours.
Wow.
In disaster relief. And they, on top of that, had about 300,000 real-life scenario exercises, 300,000 hours, I should say. Yeah, so it's regularly used, which results in reliability and readiness.
And you're able to face whenever a new disaster occurs. So, last question for you. What would be the advantages for young people that are probably in the audience to volunteer, to take some of their personal time to train and join such a civilian-based disaster relief organization?
We don't often give youth a role in society, and yet we expect adults to show and demonstrate civil engagement. So what this German approach of training and including youth early on, actually at the age of 6, has resulted in is that, you realize that volunteering becomes almost like a way of life. So when you start with this responsibility and trust that you can make a difference early on in life, you want to continue that on in your adult years. And so when you think of the advantages that way, it's a perfect recruitment tool for the organization. But the concrete advantages for youth are actually also manifold, because we always hear from volunteers that what they get out of their volunteering is so rewarding, in terms of purpose and all that. But civil protection is such an interesting field, and these technical capabilities include such a wide range that when you think of it, you get concrete skills, hands-on work skills in terms of working with wood or working with metal or stone, including heavy machinery or, certifications or driver's licenses for heavy equipment. You get that training and all those skills and certifications for free in kind of exchange for you to sign up to be of service. Yes. And then you also include all the leadership, and management and planning skills. So it's really, really valuable that way. And then the other aspect, of course, is that especially in our day and age where people are so much focused on their screens, this is a way to escape your ordinary life and make real world connections with people and do something with your hands that is completely outside of what you would do in your regular life. So it also brings back those benefits that you connect with your community, whatever background or how do you say that? Walk of life. Yeah. You connect with your community, whatever walk of life people are coming from. It's a networking opportunity, but you also feel that you belong, which I think is a very human trait that we all kind of long for. For sure. And this sense of being part of a team and camaraderie is what eventually will keep you committed to whatever your volunteer mission is.
Yeah, and also in case something ever happens when you're walking on the street to go to work, you're able to do something about it. And, not just call 911, but also do, what you as a civilian.
Yeah, and that's it, where it's really empowering, and you feel that you remain in control when something goes wrong. You know what to do. It's not traumatic for you the same way as it would be if you have no idea what to do.
For sure. Well, Eva, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your interest.
You're welcome. Looking forward to having you back at some point.